There are so many Warhammer video games available, it's kind of insane, and they vary wildly in quality. Sometimes it seems like Games Workshop gives out the license without a second thought. Other times, it's clear that they start out with something solid and amounts to, well, less in the long run. Hello, I'm Robert with Society Case Files, and today I'm talking about the Dawn of War series. Dawn of War 3 was on sale during the Steam Autumn sale, so I thought I'd look at all the games and talk about them here. This series started 20 years ago in 2004. Since then, it's seen a dramatic shift from game to game, even changing significantly between expansions. Let's start with the first one, Dawn of War. By the time Dawn of War released, we'd already been through 3 Warcraft games and tons of Command & Conquer titles. I remember playing a lot of real-time strategy back then, and I peripherally liked Warhammer, but I didn't know that much about it. Getting to play as a Space Marine during the campaign proved to be quite a bit of fun, even if I was completely lost as to the lore and everything else going on around it. I really liked the base building aspect of that one. The expansions made it a little more insane how it worked, but it was a pretty solid entry, and it gave me the same sort of vibe that I got from things like Warcraft and Command & Conquer. The first one had a great story, and the gameplay loop was really fun. I was heavily into narrative back then, so I primarily dug it for that aspect. Just the fact that they told a story and that the characters had a lot to say and that there were cutscenes, that was all really cool. They committed to supporting the game because in 2005 they released Winter Assault, which let you play as the Imperial Guard and Eldar versus the Orcs and Chaos. The narrative in that one was particularly interesting in that there were multiple endings, and you got to pick which side you get to play through at the midway point of the game, so to speak. I played obsessively enough that I got to see them all, and the factions in that expansion were a little bit simplified, but still quite a bit of fun. The multiplayer mode saw the most quote-unquote change, since unit counters were altered by those modifications, but I didn't do much of that back then, so it was really all about the story and the campaign for me. After Winter Assault came out, they released Dark Crusade in 2006, and this featured a sort of non-linear campaign in that you were there to take over the planet Kronos. You could play as any of several factions, including the Tau, Chaos, Necrons, Orcs, Imperial Guard, Eldar, and the Space Marines. Each of them had their own ending, but the stories getting there weren't like the original where there was a strict narrative for each battle. It was a little bit more generic, if you will. It was nice to have an objective for the different factions, though, but the loss of that deeper story was kind of a bummer. Combat and stuff remained pretty much the same. It was still awesome, especially since you could really experience what the different sides had to offer. So if you wanted to see what the Eldar buildings looked like and how they went about it, you got that opportunity, and you could get some pretty cool voice acting as well. It was a really good experience. There was tons of replayability, and if you wanted to see each of the endings, then you were at least rewarded for that. So all around, pretty engaging. Fun fact about the Tau that I didn't know when I started this video is that the leader of basically the faction in that game, the Dark Crusade, is the protagonist from the game Warhammer 40,000 Fire Warrior, which I don't really remember playing, but I know I did. Anyway, then they released Soulstorm in 2008, and this introduced the Sisters of Battle and the Dark Eldar into the mix from basically the previous expansion. And now you fought over a larger sector of planets rather than just one. It was considered standalone, but if you only had that, then you could only play as the Sisters or the Dark Eldar. So you'd have to have the previous titles and their CD keys to unlock them. I probably played this one the most, but in a recent revisit, I have to say it was absolutely insane. Like, a Sisters unit has 10 characters. You can have a lot of them. I was fighting the Imperial Guard, and the screen was so full it looked like something was glitching. And the AI fights with absolute suicidal zeal. So it's a war of attrition in many regards. Who could keep up with fielding the most forces the fastest? I don't know how I played it so intensely in the past, because it was really difficult to stay that focused and just constantly be building new units to send them into effectively a meat grinder. There's just a big kill box where we constantly fought over 1 or 2 points and just tried to gain a little bit of ground. It was pretty nuts. All around, though, it was a neat entry, and the graphics were pretty solid. Even revisiting it now, the game runs great and it looks fine. Yes, it's a little clunky, but it's nothing like some of the other games from the era which are totally unplayable due to the way they look or run. This didn't require any tweaking to make it work either, so if you're gagging for some old school base building RTS action, then this is definitely for you. They released an anniversary edition that supposedly has all of the expansions. I installed it, and that didn't seem to be the case when I launched it, so I can't vouch for how it works, particularly since I do own them all independently anyway. Let's move on to Dawn of War 2. That came out in 2009. They barely gave Soulstorm a year before releasing an entirely new game. Before I go into anything specific about it though, this one took some finagling to make it work on a modern PC. Fortunately, it was mostly just Google searches because swapping out a single DLL allowed it to load with no problem. Otherwise, it just hangs. It was almost a bummer because I was excited to get some footage for it and to try it again, to be honest. It had been a very long time since I played it. This game changed the play style dramatically. Instead of just updating the graphics, adding some buildings or units, they completely did away with base building. Instead, you rely on hero characters that have attached support characters. It has a little bit of that Warcraft 3 DNA in the fact that your hero is more important than the characters following them around, but more accurately, it takes from the Company of Heroes series, which the developer also made, particularly with cover and suppression. Your characters level up in this version, get better gear, even finding it on the battlefield for later, and acquire new skills. In the original game, skill ups are basically things you spend points into until you get a power upgrade. Later, they did away with that, and every time you spend a point, you get something tangible, rather than like a small increase to power levels for different character aspects like defense or, firepower, that kind of stuff. I don't remember being too surprised by the shift, but I really should have been because, this is wildly different. And with it only coming out a year after the last Dawn of War expansion, the base building model should have been fresh in my mind, especially the absence of it. Still, I played this game a lot when it came out, and I think that's because I might have considered it more accessible at the time. I know RTS games were sort of falling by the wayside in my consciousness back then. I was really tired of wars of attrition and playing by mini-map and all that stuff. It was tiresome. So I think this was probably a breath of fresh air. In a lot of ways, it kind of revitalized my interest in that type of game because, again, I did play this one quite a bit. The first expansion for Dawn of War 2 came out in 2010. It was called Chaos Rising. It continued the narrative while adding a corruption system. This changed the outcome of the game, so you could get a different ending. Cool idea, and it was nice to see it expand. I had no problem with trying the game a couple of different ways just to see what would happen. They weren't afraid to make changes back then with these games. Just try new stuff and experiment, which was kind of cool. You don't see that as much anymore. It was a solid entry, and I think it gave you plenty of extra stuff to do and see to be worthy of purchase. And I can't even remember how expensive it was. I doubt the prices changed too much considering how expensive all of these are right now. The final expansion for Dawn of War 2 was called Retribution, and it dropped in 2011. This one was my favorite. They considered it a standalone, and they added the Imperial Guard. Each faction had their own campaign too, which kind of was nice to see. Gave you a chance to really see each of them in action. The Inquisition figures prominently throughout the story, and they do a great job of letting you experience the diversity of the characters. I've got some footage playing the orcs here, and they're not as well suited to the smaller scale in my opinion, but they were still quite a bit of fun. The personalities of the factions are on full display, and that really helps. Funny enough, several of my original campaigns were still available to play when I loaded it up, though I know I beat every one of the factions. Some of them were really low level, and I don't really know why. There was a co-op mode in this game called The Last Stand, where you play as a single character with two other players against waves of enemies. And I really dug it big time back then. I got a Farseer up to level 11 before I must have been distracted by some other game. But I gotta say, my dad played the heck out of this, and goodness knows how high up he is. I know that he still plays it to this day. As a matter of fact, he mentioned it recently. So, a very engaging little extra. I noticed that despite the fact that you have to fiddle with this game to get it work on a modern machine, there were still over 400 people playing. So I suppose you could probably still find some folks to play that mode with, even right now. The graphics on this one still hold up very well. They're great. They do the job, and especially the individual models, they're cool. At 13 years, I have to say I was really surprised. If you're willing to go through the hassle to find that DLL and mess with it, this game's worth a revisit. There's so much to do in it, and if you like this kind of game, then you'll be entertained for a long time, especially when it's on sale. When it's not on sale, well, we'll talk about price in just a moment. The last thing I want to say about that DLL is that it was not a big deal, but I did see a lot of people complain about it because they were concerned about mucking around with that kind of thing, and I totally get it. I don't think it's too big of a deal. And the only reason I don't bring up exactly how to do it is that if it did cause problems, I don't want you to hate on me about it. But it is out there, and it was very easy to find, I promise. So let's talk about the cost now. During the autumn sale, Dawn of War 1 was $6.99, and it normally sells for $34.99, which is, I think, absurd for how old it is. Dawn of War 2 is going for $9.99, and it's normally $50. Come on, guys. Seriously? The sale prices are more than worth it, but full retail? I mean, for the same price as a brand new game, that's just a little bit ridiculous. And it's a little harder to recommend, regardless of how great they are. Much as I like them, and I hesitate to say this, much as I like them, I just can't see paying full retail price for a game that would have come out this year. And all that said, this leads us to Dawn of War 3, the game I played the least. It came out in 2017, and while they dragged out some positive reviews from magazines, it sits at mixed right now on Steam. It clearly got abandoned fast, though, since there are no expansions and not much in the way of any sort of support. The community seems to have added a bunch of mods, though, so there is that to look forward to. And someone said that multiplayer isn't dead either, though I didn't try it, and I'm not a big fan of this kind of game in multiplayer. It's very frustrating for me. Also, while the developers may not have added anything to the game, they're still maintaining the servers, because I just saw a message a week ago that said that they brought them down to do some work on them, so that's kind of cool. But anyway, I've seen more complaints about this game than I can count. The reviews in general talk about things like it just being crap. I mean, there's not a whole lot to it. There are some people who go crazy and write a whole bunch of things. I kind of see their point, because it is a bit hard to get into right away, but I did enjoy it all around. Primarily the story. Again, I'm back to campaigns, but let's talk about the tutorial. It's totally ridiculous. The other games taught you through a campaign mission. You learned about the buildings in the middle of the story. They'd say, hey, we need more of these guys. Let's build that. This one has all the immersion of corporate talk on ethics. This character is a powerful melee unit with crowd control abilities. It's like they decided meta was more important than story or getting you into the world at all. I mean, lore didn't matter, because they were just going to tell you in the most dry way possible specifically what to do so that you understood how to play the game. If this was a person's first impression, then I'm not at all surprised by the reaction in these reviews. It's completely out of character for the series, and it's just boring. It's a terrible way to learn how to play the game. It's also very clinical compared to Dawn of War 2's introduction, where you have to save an outpost while learning the basics. You know, there's a whole bunch of bad guys shooting at your companions, and you've got to rush in and fight them off and conduct more missions from there. And you learn all of the aspects of the game in the middle of something that matters, not just, you know, a random arena where stuff just appears whenever you need a new objective to clarify their point. I'm not sure why they thought this was a better plan than just making a mission with the same objectives they wanted to convey, but that's what they did. It certainly wasn't easier to make this tutorial level. I know I'm harping on it a lot, but it was a really bad idea, and it made the game feel like a chore rather than entertainment. I kind of have the impression that what they did was made the whole game, and someone's like, how do you even play this? And they're like, John, what are you doing over there? Do you mind just recording some random lines to make this tutorial work? And they're like, yeah, we can bust this out by lunch. One last thing. I like nothing more than when a tutorial harps on me over and over again with the same command after I've already initiated it, but the characters in question are slow as hell. Even the bored voice starts to get anxious because it just is taking too damn long. Major sarcasm, but come on, guys. That was really annoying. So let's get back to the game itself. Cover added an energy field, and this is a little silly. So you take over an area that would normally provide cover. Like in Dawn of War 2, you just have like a symbol that shows that you're taking less damage and you can't move as fast. But this game just had to take it to the next level, and when you take over a cover area, it forms a bubble around you. It's ridiculous. They could have done anything but make a force field, but whatever. Just increase the ability to take damage, or literally anything but this. I don't know. It just feels very gamey, and it kind of takes away from the immersion as well. Then there's stealth cover. I don't know. It's cool as far as the mechanics are concerned, but I'm not a fan of it because it's just silly. Like, there are these vents producing some steam, and these massive space marines are able to stand in it and not be seen. I don't buy it. It's just stupid. Stealth enemies if you want, but I don't know. Create a cover system where the stealth is more efficient. I don't know. A plate with wispy smokes hiding the massive characters, or even grass in other games. It's a harder sell. Some good stuff. The graphics, I like the models, the bases, the environments, the animations. They're all really nice. I wouldn't say they're dramatically better than Dawn of War 2, but you know, I mean, it's a little more modern. It did come out in 2017, and that kind of shows. It runs well, but the autosave is highly intrusive. All of a sudden the game just stops, and the first time it happened, I thought it crashed. The screen just automatically dims, like all of a sudden it needed a 1200 watt power supply to even consider the activity. All around, I'm not sure why that happens, because the autosave in the other two games is pretty much instant. In fact, most games that I've been playing lately have an instant autosave that doesn't pause the game, and that includes a game like Stalker 2. So come on, guys, what was that all about? There's not that much to keep track of in Dawn of War 3, so who knows? Whatever. Just one more strange decision they made. The campaign tells the story by alternating between the factions. So mission 1 starts with you playing the Space Marines, and then the second one follows with the Orcs. And it's a little weird defending Cyprus with your basically the Blood Ravens, and then trashing it the very next level with the Orcs. I'd be much more excited for multiple campaigns where you could do them in order like the way they used to do it. So basically play the whole thing of the Space Marines and then the whole thing of the Orcs and so on. This feels like a novel where you get all the perspectives of an overarching story in one go, rather than having to read 3 novels from each of the different perspectives. Consequently, Necromunda Hive Wars does this as well, and I'll talk about that another day. Didn't like it in that either, so this might just be a me thing. I do like how the Orcs work, though. They level up their gear by looting crap on the ground. They have a good feel to them. They really are orky. I think this is a better version of the Orcs than the traditional base building, too. It kind of gives them a real sense of what they're about. Just a bunch of fun-loving criminals running around stealing stuff. Overall, I think the campaign's pretty fun, and it's worth the price of admission, even if you don't do anything else at all. I did try what amounts to the multiplayer, and I suppose that people probably had the most trouble with that. I'm not entirely sure because I didn't deep dive it, but a lot of the complaints talk about counters and just the general way that they went about building the game itself. I suppose that they're more talking about the multiplayer, unless they just despise how the game plays itself, and that's more than possible. I know that the heroes are far more important in this game than the units that run around with them, and in this one, the secondary guys, your assault Marines and all them that you build, they're pretty much just meat for the grinder, but so were they in the original game. I mean, you lost tons of guys once you started doing the battle for attrition. But if you look at the Steam charts, you'll definitely need to find some friends to play if you hope to get into a game, because there just aren't that many. The current player count as of this recording for Dawn of War 3 sat at 249. Dawn of War 2 Retribution had 400, and Soulstorm had 1,266. I can't say what specifically about Dawn of War 3 failed for people, but I think that it was partly the presentation and just the sort of shift towards MOBA style gaming. The method they delivered the campaign could have been a problem if you don't like that whole alternating factions in between missions. That definitely is going to throw you off. Could be that terrible tutorial that just gave a really bad first impression, and maybe it came down to multiplayer. You know, people take that very seriously, and these kinds of games can be very competitive, and some of the original systems that they put into place were just despised, to say the least. But whatever the case, Dawn of War 3 killed the franchise. I sincerely doubt that we're ever going to see a Dawn of War 3. I mean, I guess it's possible. It took forever for a Space Marine 2 to come out. On a steep sale, I think it's a fairly enjoyable Warhammer experience. It's probably easier to stomach if you try hard not to compare it to the previous entries, and when you only spend less than $10. That makes every game easier to play. But anyway, Those are my thoughts on the Dawn of War series. Have you played these games? Which one is your favorite? Which one did you play the most? Would you buy one now on sale to try? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for checking in today. I'll see you next time. Bye.